The sky cracked open in a silent shimmer. Above the forested basin of Sector 16 on the planet Aruhelm, a transport ship from the Galactic Conservation Corps quietly descended, its matte gray hull reflecting the burnt orange hues of the twin suns. Inside, Commander Vetrax of the Ulari species reviewed the mission brief once more with all three eyes narrowed in concern. Human presence confirmed in the southern quadrant, Vetrax said, his voice low and gravelly. Unregistered. No diplomatic clearance. Beside him, the younger scout officer, Lenyu, adjusted his translator device. Why would a human be here? This sector's restricted due to the Predator Rehabilitation Zone. Vetrax didn't answer right away. He tapped the display, pulling up footage from a surveillance drone. A human male, late 30s, tall, lean build, moving slowly through the underbrush. His clothing was patched and weathered. A large pack was strapped across his back. Vetrax zoomed in on the face. Find out who he is. If he's interfering with the wildlife recovery ops, we'll have to intervene. Victor Barnes knelt by the stream, hands submerged in the cool current as he rinsed the grime from his skin. The water was clean, surprisingly so. Not many places left in the galaxy like this untouched, raw. A soft rustle behind him caused him to freeze. He turned his head slowly. About 20 meters away, half hidden behind a fallen tree, lay the creature. Its fur was matted with blood, breathing labored. It was massive, feline-shaped but with reptilian ridges along its spine. One leg was twisted unnaturally beneath it. Victor didn't move. The creature's yellow eyes flicked toward him, pupils narrowing. It growled, low and guttural, but didn't rise. It couldn't. Well, hell, Victor muttered under his breath, reaching slowly for the small medical kit in his side pouch. He crept forward, not directly at it, but at an angle, eyes scanning for signs of a trap or pack mates. Nothing. The predator was alone, injured, and from the look of it had been for at least a day. Flies hovered near the wound. Not gonna hurt you, Victor said, voice calm. The creature bared its teeth. Yeah, I'd say the same if I were you. He stopped 5 meters away and crouched. You're not gonna last another night if that leg starts festering. He opened the kit slowly, laying out gauze, antiseptic, and a compact bone scanner. The moment the scanner emitted a soft beep, the predator lunged forward with a roar. It didn't get far, its leg gave out immediately and it collapsed with a pained snarl. Victor stayed perfectly still. You done? He asked after a beat. The predator panted, eyes locked on him. But it didn't try again. Victor moved in. Vetrax and Lenyu watched from the treetop, cloaked in adaptive camouflage. Lenyu leaned forward, tapping his visor. He's treating it. That's one of the Razor Claw's Class 2 Apex Predator. That human's not wearing any armor. He's using bare hands. Vetrax didn't speak. On the ground, Victor worked quickly. The leg was fractured, not shattered. He sprayed a numbing agent around the joint, then slid the scanner over the limb. The device projected a skeletal image. 2 breaks clean. He'd need to splint it. He pulled out a pair of collapsible rods from his pack and cut thin strips from his own shirt to bind them. The predator flinched as heat touched the leg, but it didn't strike. Sweat beaded on Victor's forehead. Every second he expected claws in his chest. Instead, the beast let out a low, vibrating whine. I know it sucks, Victor said, tightening the last wrap. But it's better than dying infected and alone. He reached for the water flask and held it out. The predator didn't drink. Victor laid it beside its head. Above them, Lenyu finally spoke. He didn't run. Didn't shoot. That's not what I expected. Most species would have left it to die, Vetrax replied. Or killed it for safety. Should we approach? Observe. For now. Over the next 3 days, Victor visited the predator twice a day, bringing water, food, and checking the leg. The swelling had gone down, and the creature which he'd started calling Ridge no longer growled when he touched it. He kept his distance at night, setting up camp half a kilometer away, but always within earshot. On the 4th morning, he woke to heavy breathing beside his tent. Ridge sat there, watching him silently. Victor didn't move. You following me now? The beast tilted its head. Victor sat up slowly. You're gonna blow my cover if you keep doing that. He broke a protein bar in half and tossed a piece toward Ridge. It caught it midair. Back on the Ulari ship, Vetrax reviewed the footage. He's been here for 10 days. According to the background profile names, Victor Barnes, former wildlife medic, U.S. Pacific Range Services, lost his license after treating a genetically modified bear illegally. Lenyu raised a brow. Why would he come here? Maybe guilt? Maybe instinct. Humans are strange that way. Lenyu studied the latest footage. He's moving Ridge toward the recovery zone. Traveling on foot. That's near the cliff sector. That area was flagged for instability after the last tremor. Should we warn him? Vetrax hesitated. No. Let's see what he does. The ridge path narrowed dangerously. Victor led the way with Ridge limping behind. The creature had started to recover slowly, but the leg wasn't strong enough for climbing. Victor had fashioned a makeshift harness and occasionally supported the beast with a looped rope around his waist. They were halfway across the narrow ledge when the ground gave out. Victor shouted as the earth crumbled beneath him, sending him sliding. Ridge lunged forward and bit into the harness strap, anchoring him. Victor dangled over the edge, legs flailing. His shoulder slammed into the rock wall. Pain shot down his side. Hold, Ridge. Hold. He dug his boots into the cliff face, groaning as he pulled himself up with his good arm. Blood dripped from his elbow. After several agonizing minutes, he managed to scramble back onto the ledge. Ridge released the strap, panting. Victor collapsed next to him, chest heaving. All right, he gasped. We're not doing that again. Vetrax stared at the footage. He almost died. For a predator. Lenyu shook his head. That wasn't instinct. That was choice. Vetrax pressed a button on the console. Prepare a landing crew. We're bringing him in. Victor woke in a bright white room, his shoulder wrapped in a sling. A soft beeping came from a monitor nearby. His head throbbed. Ridge lay nearby, sedated but stable inside a transparent containment dome. You're awake, came a voice. Victor turned his head. Vetrax stood in the entryway, arms crossed. We tracked you. Watched everything. Victor sat up carefully, wincing. You could have helped, you know. We didn't know what you were. Or why you were here. I wasn't here for you, Victor said. I saw Ridge injured. I helped. You risked your life, Vetrax said. Twice. For a creature that could have killed you. Victor looked at Ridge. He didn't. Most species, even Ulari, would not have done what you did. Victor shrugged. Then maybe most species need to rethink their priorities. Vetrax studied him for a long time before speaking again. You were reckless. Ill-prepared. But you were brave. Victor leaned back against the bed, letting the compliment hang in the air. Can I see him when he wakes? He asked. You may. But not alone. For now, rest. Your shoulder is dislocated. Your ribs have minor fractures. You'll need at least 6 weeks. Victor groaned. Figures. 6 weeks later, Victor stood outside a reinforced enclosure on the Ulari conservation compound. Ridge, now fully mobile, paced inside, pausing only when he saw Victor. The predator approached the barrier and pressed its head lightly against the transparent wall. Victor smiled. Yeah. Missed you, too. Vetrax watched from a distance with Lenyu. Will you report him? Lenyu asked. Vetrax shook his head. No. Some beings don't need regulation. They need purpose. And the predator? He'll be catalogued. Released into the open wilds once the leg is cleared. Lenyu paused. Why do you think the human stayed with it so long? Vetrax looked at Victor, who now had his hand against the enclosure glass. Because he saw pain and didn't turn away. That is rare. Victor stayed on Aruhelm for another 3 months, working with the conservation team, now officially invited. He helped design better field kits, improved recovery protocols, and even trained an Ulari medic on how to approach injured predators safely. His shoulder healed slowly. The ribs took longer. He didn't push himself too fast. And when Ridge was finally released into the wild, Victor watched from a distance, standing on a rocky ridge. The predator looked back once before disappearing into the thick trees. Victor exhaled, long and slow. He'd come to Aruhelm running from a mistake. He stayed because of Ridge, and he left knowing he had done something right. For once, he didn't need to explain it. The galaxy had seen it for themselves. Victor's hands hovered above the table, palms splayed. wrists stiff from holding the position too long. A translucent membrane had slithered up from the surface, securing him in place, not tight enough to hurt, but enough to make him sweat. The room smelled faintly of burnt minerals and something like mint, though less pleasant. Across from him stood 3 Ulari officials, all in neutral gray robes, each with their own translator node blinking faintly beneath their throats. "You used unauthorized entry protocols," said the tallest one, who hadn't introduced himself. His neck ridge pulsed with faint blue, indicating restrained agitation. "And falsified your planetary clearance." Victor didn't argue. He just shifted slightly and winced as the motion pulled at his shoulder. The harness incident had left one tendon irritated and the joint sluggish. He hadn't had time to rehab it properly yet. "I landed a kilometer outside the protected boundary," he said. "Didn't cross it until I heard the distress call." "There was no distress call," said the shorter Ulari on the left, whose facial structure suggested she was from the northern continent. Her tone was flat, clinical, like she was reading off a checklist. Victor blinked. "That's not right?" It repeated 3 times. "Emergency pulse signature. Audio overlay in galactic standard." "I followed it." The 3 officials exchanged glances. "There are no beacons stationed in that quadrant," she continued. "None transmitting that code. And certainly none pre-programmed to use galactic standard. This isn't a human-administered world." Victor's brow furrowed. "I know what I heard." The tallest Ulari leaned forward. "We reviewed every frequency in the area. Nothing matches your claim. If you can produce the signal log from your device, it got crushed when I fell," Victor said. "By the cliff. Same time I dislocated my shoulder." They stared at him, unmoved. He sighed. "Look, I didn't come here to break rules. I came because something was suffering and I could help." The middle Ulari, who had remained quiet until now, narrowed his lower eye. "You didn't help one of your own. You helped a volatile species designed for combat. What exactly did you think would happen?" Victor's voice was steady. "I wasn't thinking about outcome. I was thinking about pain." There was a silence, not hostile, but tight, the kind that made breathing feel like a negotiation. Then the shortest one said, "You'll remain under observation until we determine whether your presence created any ecological imbalance. Your behavior is being reviewed by the Interspecies Ethics Board." Victor nodded once. "Fine, but Ridge stays in the zone. He's stabilized. Releasing him now won't compromise the ecosystem. We'll determine that." The membrane retracted, and Victor flexed his fingers slowly. He didn't thank them. They didn't expect him to. Later that day, he sat on the edge of a low observation deck, legs dangling over the edge. The compound overlooked a dense expanse of canopies, broken only by narrow streams of sunlight piercing through the fog. Ridge was out there somewhere now, tagged, yes, but free. A soft thrum of wings approached from behind, and a shadow passed overhead. Lenyu landed beside him, the wings folding neatly into his backplate. Unlike the others, Lenyu's robes bore a faint green trim indicating junior status or specialization. Victor couldn't remember which. "I watched the footage again," Lenyu said, "from the ridge collapse. Your rope system wasn't calibrated for that weight ratio." "No," Victor said. "It wasn't. You knew it might snap." "It did. Twice before I reinforced it with a second loop." Lenyu tilted his head. "You rigged a double loop harness with no anchor point, minimal friction control, and a predator on the other end." Victor nodded. "That's irrational." Victor looked out at the trees. "If you're trying to say I was lucky, I agree. I wasn't." Lenyu crouched beside him. "I'm trying to understand the root assumption. You had no guarantee Ridge wouldn't let go." Victor shrugged. "Instinct. Yours or his?" "Both." Lenyu watched him for a moment. "We don't apply instinct as a metric in Ulari field protocols." "Well, maybe you should start." A silence settled between them, less brittle than before. Lenyu seemed to consider something, then said, "The ethics board is leaning toward expulsion. They think you created an emotional bond that could alter Ridge's behavior long term. Make him dependent." Victor smiled faintly. He left on his own. No leash. No command. He didn't look back. Lenyu tapped a thin device on his wrist. A projection bloomed in the air ridge, moving through dense foliage, head low, gait steady. He paused at a stream, drank, then continued east toward the deeper wilds. He started carving territory, Lenyu said. Victor watched the recording. Good. Lenyu hesitated. You want to stay, don't you? Victor nodded. You could apply for provisional field status. With supervision. Even after the clearance breach? You'd start at the bottom, Lenyu said. Observation posts. No direct interaction. Victor leaned back on his elbows. I've worked worse jobs. There's a test. Of course there is. Lenyu stood. You'll need to demonstrate containment protocols, response time under stress, and cultural neutrality. Victor raised an eyebrow. Cultural neutrality? There are 6 species working in this sector. You're the only human. Some of them find your methods unsettling. I've heard that before. Lenyu's mandibles twitched slightly. One of the senior observers said you made yourself bait for a predator. They used the word insane. Victor stood, stretching his shoulder cautiously. I've been called worse. 3 days later, Victor found himself standing in a wide, gravel-covered training yard behind the compound. 6 obstacle stations had been set up. Terrain simulation, containment vault entry, rapid splinting, toxin identification, stress endurance, and interspecies empathy evaluation, whatever that meant. A squat, armored Macari instructor waved him toward the starting line with a clawed hand. No tools. You get what's in the crate. Victor opened the crate. Inside were a ragged cloth, a length of binding cord, a filtered water capsule, and a diagnostic scanner with a cracked display. Time starts when you cross the line, the Macari said. Victor nodded, took a breath, and ran. The terrain simulation was rough, a mix of shifting rock plates and synthetic underbrush designed to mimic unstable ground. Halfway through, one of the plates collapsed, exposing a foam pit. Victor caught himself on the edge, hauled up, and kept moving. At the containment vault, he was presented with a sealed pod containing a simulated injured Zarn larvae. The pod was overheating. Victor used the water capsule to cool the exterior, wrapped the cloth around his forearm, and cracked the seal. The larvae hissed and writhed. Its limb was bent backward. He scanned it with the cracked display, fracture confirmed. He splinted it with the cord, used the cloth to bind it, and resealed the pod. At the toxin station, he was shown a set of vials and asked to identify the one safe for ingestion. He sniffed, swirled, and tapped each one. The third turned the scanner green. He drank it. His mouth went numb. The stress endurance test involved a series of flashing lights, sirens, and simulated injuries being shouted at once. He had to focus on one voice and treat its case: a dislocated carpal joint in a mock Ulari limb. He relocated it cleanly, ignoring the rest. At the final station, he found a pale, translucent Kithari waiting. You must address me without using any dominant language structures, it said. No commands, no assumptions, no urgency. Begin. Victor knelt. You're in pain. The Kithari blinked. I don't know what you need. I'm not you. But I'll wait until you can show me. The Kithari tilted its head. Accepted. The Macari instructor grunted. Not bad. You're alive. That's more than most applicants. Victor wiped sweat from his neck. That's your bar? Alive? For humans, yes. Later that evening, Lenyu approached him with a data pad. You passed. Barely. Victor took the pad. Barely, still a pass. You'll be assigned to the eastern sector. Observation only. No intervention without clearance. Victor grinned. Noted. Lenyu paused. You could have left. Nothing's keeping you here. Victor looked out at the horizon. Something is. The eastern observation post resembled a leaning tower of scrap welded by someone with a grudge against straight lines. Victor stood at its base, one hand shielding his eyes against Aruhelm's second sun as the structure cast a crooked shadow over him. The Ulari technician beside him, whose name he hadn't caught and didn't ask for, adjusted a small crystalline control puck and nodded toward the creaking ladder stitched up the side. That's your unit. Victor squinted. It's slanted. It's anchored, the technician said, tapping the base with his foot. Mostly. I'm not afraid of heights, Victor said, but I'm afraid of uninspected well jobs. You'll adapt. The technician handed him a small black cube. This is your comm node. It's tuned to supervisory and emergency frequencies only. Don't try to use it for entertainment. Victor pocketed it. What do I do if the tower collapses? Record the angle it falls. We've got a wager going. Victor climbed. The ladder flexed under him, groaning metallically with each step, but it held. At the top, the platform was barely wide enough for a cot, a monitor, and a folding stool. A dome canopy extended overhead, filtering sun glare and refracting it into shifting greens. He sat on the edge, legs hanging over the side. Below stretched the eastern quadrant, a jagged landscape of vine-tangled ravines and exposed roots that twisted like petrified nerves. The air smelled of moss and something acidic, probably the local nectar pods decomposing. A soft chime on the monitor broke the silence. A red dot pulsed on the screen, moving slowly west. He tapped the console. Unit E5. Tracking movement along vector G2. Species. A voice drifted through the comm, unidentified. Size suggests medium quadruped. Not tagged. Behavior. Erratic. Loping gait. Could be juvenile or injured. Victor leaned closer. The dot paused, then veered sharply north, passing the outer limit of the recovery perimeter by 20 meters. Requesting drone scan, he said. Denied came the reply. Low priority. Maintain visual observation. Victor exhaled. Copy. He grabbed the portable scope from the rack, unfolded it, and swept the area. Through the lens, the terrain shimmered with heat distortion, but no sign of movement. Then he saw it, a blur of pale motion between the vines. The creature was limping, front right leg held stiff, head low. It looked like a hybrid of a gazelle and a pangolin, with narrow shoulders and plated segments curling along its spine. The skin was flaking. Victor tapped the monitor again. Confirm if untagged. I'm not permitted to engage? Correct. No unauthorized field interventions. He watched the animal stumble against a low root and collapse. Understood, he said. He shut off the comm, grabbed the med pack, and climbed down the tower. It took him nearly 40 minutes to reach the ravine basin where the creature had fallen. The air here was thicker, laced with spores that clung to his sleeves. He moved carefully, boots slipping once on a dewy patch of moss. The creature hadn't moved. It lay on its side, flank heaving. A translucent film coated its rump and its breathing was shallow. Victor crouched beside it. Its eyes open, slitted, amber, and unfocused. Hey, he said softly. I'm not going to hurt you. He reached for his scanner, then paused. The creature's breathing had shifted faster now, uneven. He checked the nostrils. No discharge, but the exhalation was warm, too warm. Fever, he muttered. Probably infection. That leg's not broken, or you wouldn't have made it this far. He pulled a sterile blade from the kit and sliced open the crusted film. A burst of cloudy fluid seeped out, followed by a sharp, sour odor. The creature twitched but didn't resist. He cleaned the wound with saline, then packed it with antiseptic foam. The swelling was extensive but localized. If the infection hadn't reached the bloodstream, it had a chance. Victor pulled out a hypo-injector and loaded a broad-spectrum antibiotic. He leaned over the creature's shoulder, felt along the muscle for a safe injection point, and delivered the dose. The creature shivered once, then went still. Victor sat back on his heels. You're gonna hate me when you wake up, but you'll live. A soft rustle behind him made him turn. Two Ulari observers stood at the edge of the basin, both wearing high-visibility field cloaks. One held a scanner, the other had already activated their comm. You were given explicit non-intervention orders, the one with the scanner said. Victor stood slowly. It was septic. I wasn't going to watch it die when I could fix it. You're not a veterinarian assigned to this quadrant. You're not even licensed. Victor crossed his arms. I treated the infection, stabilized the vitals, and administered a legal dose of a standard antibiotic. That's better than waiting for the thing to go into shock. The second observer lowered their comm. You're being recalled to the compound for disciplinary review. No problem, Victor said. But someone's going to need to monitor this one. It'll need fluids in 12 hours, maybe less. If you leave it here, everything I just did won't matter. Neither Ulari responded. Victor turned and began walking back toward the ridge path. 2 hours later, he sat on a bench outside the compound's adjudication chamber. His shirt was smeared with dried antiseptic foam, and his knuckles were scraped. Lenyu approached, holding a clipboard. "You're making this difficult." Victor didn't look up. "Was I supposed to let it rot? There are protocols." There was pain. Lenyu sat beside him. "That's not an answer the board accepts. Maybe they should come down from their towers and spend a week in the dirt." "They won't. They're Ulari. Dirt is for roots, not politics." Victor let out a breath. "Then I'm probably done here." Lenyu tapped the clipboard. "They're not ejecting you." Victor blinked. "Why not?" "Because the creature you treated is an endangered subvariant. One of only a few dozen left on Aruhelm. You didn't just save a life. You prevented a genetic loss." Victor leaned forward. "So I'm forgiven because it happened to be rare?" Lenyu handed him a data slip. "You're being reassigned to medical instruction. Non-field. You'll train junior observers in basic triage." Victor took the slip, stared at it. "That's a desk job." "No," Lenyu said. "That's a ripple. You show 10 others how to do what you just did. And next time there's a dying creature in a ravine, someone helps it without needing permission." Victor stood. "I'm not good with chalkboards. You won't use one. The trainees will shadow you. You'll demonstrate and they'll copy." Victor raised an eyebrow. "They won't try to sedate me first? Only if you start climbing towers without clearance again." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of instruction. Victor led 3 field sessions, each with a group of 4 trainees. He demonstrated how to adapt splints using local materials, how to read a pulse through armored scales, and how to recognize heat stress in species without sweat glands. The trainees took notes, asked questions, and more than once looked at him sideways when he improvised a technique not listed in the manual. He showed them anyway. On the final day, as the last trainee packed up their gear, Lenyu walked up carrying a small recording tablet. Victor raised an eyebrow. "What now?" "I'm submitting a request to make your methods part of the official protocol." Victor laughed. "That's a bad idea." "Maybe, but it's a necessary one." He looked toward the trees. "You think Ridge is still out there?" Lenyu nodded. "We picked up a scent trail near the northern cliffs. He's hunting independently. No signs of distress." Victor smiled. "Good." Lenyu tapped the recorder off. "You're still reckless." Victor shrugged. "But now I'm teaching others how to be responsibly reckless." They stood in silence for a moment, the sun casting long shadows over the compound yard. Victor turned, brushed his hands on his pants, and said, "All right. Who's next?" Lenyu pointed toward a young observer approaching with a nervous look. Victor grinned. "Let's go ruin their expectations."